Welcome everyone to this third session, which is called Honduras Next Steps for the Implementation of the VPA Agreement. I'd like to highlight that the VPA agreement was signed in June 2018. So we are nearly a year in the negotiation process after the signature. In this session, we will present the next steps for the implementation of the agreement, as well as the expectations of the private sector about what is expected and which results are wished for. Our first panel member is Mario Antonio Martinez Padilla, which is a forest engineer and currently is the Ministry Director of the Institute for Forest Conservation, Protected Areas and Wildlife. And before, it was the director of the program and also a consultant for natural resources. Welcome, Mr. Martinez. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the Honduran government, we'd like to say hello and to say thank you, first of all, to the EU and also to the Food and Agricultural Organization for providing us this space through the signature of the agreement. There's also a thank you going to Chatham House for us to be able to share our progress within the forest sector. It's important to say that in our country, it's the Institute for Forest Conservation, Protected Areas and Wildlife, the one that decides on forest policy, and we include the whole sector and also involves the private sector and also the forest groups. As an introduction, it's also important for you to know what our forest cover is like. It's 5.4 million of hectares. It's around 48% of the national territory. However, the pine forest between 2013 and 2017 was severely affected by a pest, which led to the loss of about 500,000 hectares within that period. This was a very serious damage for the country. However, at this point, the composition of our forests, we have 57% of moist broadleaf forest, 37% pine forest, 35% of mixed forest, and 1% of mangrove. In the context of mitigation of climate change, this represents a high importance because it's the most dynamic ecosystem and has a better fixing value compared to other ecosystems. Some important statistics from our country. The territory includes protected areas. We have a forestation area of 21,000 hectares, which we have reduced in the last few years, and we've gone down to 23,000, which is about 10% in the last 5 years. And is one of the achievements of the implementation of the VPA agreement. It's also important to say that we have $66 million exports annually, and this represents, the EU represents 2 to 3% of that, and it's between the third and fourth export market after our surrounding countries in Central America, the US, and also the Caribbean. Job creation in the last 6 years is important, and the approximate figure of that is 122,000 direct and indirect jobs. And the forest sector is very important for the socio-economics of the country. It's not less important the 236 community forest management contracts which have been given to forest groups and the concessions that the government has assigned communities for the sustainable management of forest resources. Relevant statistics, we have 872 forest management plans. These plans are... I'm sorry, there seems to be an echo. From the total forest area, we have approximately 421,000 hectares under management, most of them in pine forests, nearly 80% of that. We have an annual allowable cut of little over 701,000 cubic meters. Timber products, there is a harvesting of 125 million annually. And as mentioned already, the EU represents between 2 and 3% in the last few years, which is corresponds to $1.2 million US. Within the VPA process, it's important to mention the different agents. We consider the main actors to be 5. First of all, it's the private sector, of course. We then have the social civil society organizations. Some of them are responsible for monitoring within the implementation of the agreement. We have agroforest groups, which, as well as the role of custodying and implementing the concessions, also are part of the committees and also accompany the process. An interesting element, which is different, is the indigenous and Afro-Honduran people, which are part of the process, because in the majority, they are based within the communities where the forest resources are based. And we have about 16 public bodies as a 5th group of actors. Within this group, we consider all the entities that are within the traceability chain that goes from the source to the port, and that includes the regulatory body, which is ourselves, plus those who regulate the quotas and those that regulate the commerce.
With this regard, it is important to highlight one of the key challenges for us, and this was the creation of a public roundtable, because for the implementation of the system to ensure the legality, this represents the spine of it. Just to give you a bit of context and a timeline of the FLEGT VPA process, we started information procedures between 2010 and 2011, then we went on to a formalization stage in 2012. In 2013, we held the first and second round of negotiations. Between 2014 and here, we had the introduction of the new authorities. In 2015, we hosted the 3rd and 4th round of negotiations, a 5th round held in 2016, and the last one in 2018, which ended with the initialing of the agreement by the President of the Republic. And now, the expectation is for an official signing of the agreement, and for this to then be ratified by both parties. In this case, from our side, we have made huge progress with the National Environment Commission as the introductory element of this agreement for it to be ratified. What are our expectations of the FLEGT VPA process? We are obviously, under the concept of the VPA, we're expecting for the implementation of the forest law and governance. We're hoping to promote legal trade of timber products, not just for exports, but also for the domestic market, to encourage the participation of local communities. And this is an element that is key, because one of the key elements of our VPA is inclusion. We're highly inclusive, and all the sectors that want to take part, they have official channels to let us know, and they become part of the process formally. Then, to counter deforestation, and as I said during my introduction, we have already made some progress up to date now, and we have decreased the deforestation rate by 10%. Another element that is a challenge are the measures to control illegal logging. This is linked to the previous point, also to contribute to the fight against climate change, because as a country, we're between the first and third countries more vulnerable to the effects and the impact of climate change in the world. And within the general context of our geographic, the legislation to develop a Honduran legality assurance system. Other expectations that we have are to have a tracking and monitoring system in place, and here forest monitoring, independent forest monitoring is key. We hope for an increased transparency and more political accountability when it comes to resource management and the whole traceability. Also capacity building for law enforcement, and to recognize the rights of indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples, not just in terms of the harvesting of the forest resources, but in more general terms. And also coordination between the institutions that are linked to the process. From a strategic point of view, we have two key expectations. We are analyzing the legal framework to improve the context of the incentives for the forest sector, and we are assessing the policies, the country policies, that overlap with agroforestry laws according to the main elements that are the cause contribute to deforestation: cocoa plantations, oil palms, agriculture. And this is very important for us, because in this way we would have a simplified framework that would allow us to reduce deforestation even further. Among our achievements, we highlight the initialing of the agreement, which as a government is a huge achievement, because it represents a platform for the development of the forest sector, and taking into account the social, economic, and human pillars. We have an ongoing multi-annual plan that will go on between 2019 and 2023. We have an operative plan, and we also have the active involvement of indigenous and Afro-Honduran peoples, and also the private sector and the civil society. And it goes without saying the government's commitment with the process. And we are looking at signing and finalizing soon. And also a key element for the country is the strategy against illegal logging that is implemented. This last point represents for us the cornerstone of the legality system, because here it includes all the different guidelines for the reduction of deforestation and the promotion of reforestation in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Martinez, for your excellent presentation and use of time. We are now going to invite Mrs. Norma Rodriguez, who is the President of the National Council of Women Cooperative Members and is Secretary of the Honduran Federation of Agroforestry Cooperatives. And also of the Agroforestry Huanaica, and also is the president of the Honduran Federation of Agroforestry Cooperatives, FECAFOR. Welcome, Mrs. Rodriguez. I am currently the president of the Honduran Federation of Agroforestry Cooperatives, and I would like to tell you a little bit about our organization. We're a second-degree organization where most of the cooperatives in the country are included. Our members are approximately 100 cooperatives, and we represent them at a legal level. We have had, from the beginning of this process, of the FLECT VPA process, we have seen an opportunity for us as organized communities, because this process has opened new opportunities for us in order to participate together with government organizations, which are the ones that determine the rules of the game, and it's given us the chance to access these forest areas through the community forest policy allows this. With our system, or our legality assurance system, this allows us to comply with certain processes in order to obtain the supply chain, which means that ICF, which is the institution that rules the forest sector, it assigns us an area through a beneficial use contract. This gives the communities benefits, but we also acquire some commitments. We comply with the legal part of the forest law, but with the VPA process, we realize there are many laws in the country which we are not complying with yet, and that for us, in order to obtain the FLECT license, we would have to start to comply with many different situations that we weren't even aware of. We knew there was a law with regards to social insurance, but we didn't consider how are we going to comply with if we're in areas where we don't have social insurance in order for us to be able to access these welfare benefits. We also have to look at the issue of protecting, of guarantees, so that we can see how our employees can have access to all these benefits. In the VPA, we see an opportunity to be able to improve the life conditions of our producers, of the people in our communities. And within our process, we also have a lot of expectations, such as to strengthen the applicability of the country's legislation. There are so many laws, as I was saying. They are very good laws, but they're not very easy to enforce. With the VPA, we can find a way to do so. We also look to improve the life conditions of our members, the people in the communities, through the enforcement of all these rules. If the producer didn't have this life insurance or other benefits, now they will have it, and will also have other benefits, and as well as the opportunity to work in the forest. We also want to strengthen capacity of our human resources, with respect to legality issues, the management of natural resources, etc. We have a lot of human resources, people who live within the forest, and we don't think that we need to take people outside of the forest, but rather to teach them to live with the forest, with all the resources we have around us. In order for us to protect these resources, we have to learn to live with these resources. To attain a better forest governance is essential within this VPA process that is going to help us improve governance. Strengthen the community forestry. Community forestry we see as a great opportunity because it's through it that people who live in the communities are able to harvest the resources that we have around us. We also would like to increase the areas of forests which are under forest management. As the Minister said beforehand, we are a country with great forest resources, so as the process goes ahead, we'd like to add the intervention in more forest areas for our communities. Also to guarantee the legal security with regards to land tenure. Land tenure is a grave problem in Honduras because we don't have the clarity yet with regards to who is the owner of certain areas. Sometimes communities are assigned an area which is in theory the areas have been identified, but in some cases there are other institutions which interfere when it comes to documenting some areas as private, and they're not brought forward to the institution that rules the forest sector. So some areas that are assigned to us already have some issues with regards to the tenure, so we lose some legal security. We sometimes draft a management plan, but when it's time to harvest, the owner who has a document does not allow us to do so. So we fall into this legal insecurity problem. We also hope that with the VPA process, the processing or handling becomes more agile. We still have a lot of problems with regards to time, and time means money. So to produce legally is that. What are the incentives that as producers we could have if legally producing is so expensive and we lose the opportunity to compete in a good market? As opportunities of the FLECT VPA process, we see the chance to have new markets, the chance to enter new markets, to obtain better prices, to improve the capacity to compete, to have the chance to access loans. The forest sector in this country at the time is the only sector that doesn't have access to a loan. We haven't got a guarantee. A management plan is not considered a guarantee in order to access a loan. So communities don't have the capacity to intervene in our areas in a debt-free way as a third party. We also hope to increase production and to enjoy all the social benefits that we've been talking about, to have the legal stability through land tenure, which we hope is going to improve through the VPA process, because it already has a lot of good strategies that will need to be implemented. But in order for this to happen, there will have to be a lot of fund management, because there are many institutions in the country, but they haven't got the financial capacity in order to enforce the laws. We hope that with this, the institutions increases also the capacity in order to enforce the law. With this, we're also trying to obtain a better protection of the natural resources, the forests above all, because once we protect the forests, we will be protecting oxygen, life, and animals, which is being lost rapidly at this point. But we hope that with all the commitments acquired through the VPA, this situation will improve our resources. And I go back to talking about incentives, because the communities organized when signing a contract with the state, we also become the tool that can help improve conditions of the resources where the government is not able to reach, because we are there on the ground where fires take place, where illegal logging happens, but we don't often have the capacity for us to go out and tell an institution, this is what's happening, or who is going to give me the security that if I go and submit a claim, they're not going to come and take me away. The communities can also be a tool for governments to protect these resources, but also as communities, we also need to be protected. We need incentives in order for us to respond to the government in the way that we expect to do. The forest law already talks about incentives, but I think the institution doesn't yet have the capacity in order to provide them, because we haven't received them as we would have liked to do. Also, through this process, we hope that we all learn to make a rational use of resources in order to guarantee the sustainable management of forests. For us is to protect reforestation, whether it's naturally or through plantation, also in regards with the harvesting, because we've seen communities close to this, they say, no, we don't want to cut any trees here, and this is not healthy for forests here. It's also to see how we can empower our people, to explain to them what is a sustainable management, what is healthy for the forest. It's not healthy just to look after it, but not to do any harvesting of it, because as in everything in life, when it's excessive, it becomes a pest and it becomes a problem. As a federation and as cooperative members, we also face some challenges. We know the VPA has been a very participatory process, where I think it is the only process that has managed to get the majority of public entities at the same table in order to discuss all the different topics. I don't know of any other process which has had the capacity to sit everybody down at a table as the VPA process has done. I think this has been a very positive part. We have managed to learn a lot from this process because of that, because the participation has been very wide. However, within our country, our people still are yet to find out more about this process. So we need projects to go along with it, so we can reach those people that we have not managed to reach yet. We also think it's necessary to apply the legislation in force, but the ICF will have to strengthen, and the rest of the institution, and all the institutions that are regarding the looking after the forest resources. Increase the production in the transformation of resources in order to obtain added value. We hope our cooperative members not just harvest the timber, but also has the capacity to provide added value, as we have done in our cooperatives, but there's a lot of work to be done. This process is also taking us to become transparent. Our organizations need to be transparent when it comes to complying with the information to all those government organizations, which are many, but we have to learn to provide clear and transparent information to them as per the process. ICF has good strategies as the follow-up system for legal timber, and we hope that with the application of all these strategies, ICF will support us as the communities in order to attain this transparency, this knowledge of knowing where the timber came from and to what extent it has been traded. We also hope to have consolidated relationships with the government. We've had good relationship, but we hope to be able to carry on having it, both at the local level, at the municipality level, but also at national level. We also need to tell the government, because the forest sector has been an invisible sector. We have seen that it has provided a lot of benefits. It's a great opportunity for job creation within communities, but up until now, the government hasn't seen it like this. The forest sector was invisible. It hasn't been taken into account. What are the revenues that the government has that are due to forest production? At this point, in this government, there's been a little bit more interest. I'm not sure whether the pest was a help for this. Perhaps it wasn't as bad. It affected the natural resources badly, but it gave us visibility. And now there's more vision of the forest sector, and also the VPA process has been an opportunity for us to have this visibility, so that we've been given the right importance. But we hope to be able to carry on telling the government, so that there are these changes and this openness to communities, as I said, because it's a chance that gives us the opportunity to create jobs both for men and women. Both men and women work in this sector, and every day the job opportunities are growing because we're looking at diversifying activities. We're not looking at the forest just as timber, because it's not just timber. We have to look at forest as a way to harvest lots of different resources, which the forest itself gives us, and gives both men and women. Oh, you finished already? Perhaps just to say, since there's still time, that currently our main activity of the cooperatives is harvesting of pine resin, although we also have liquidambar oil. But the pine resin is at a higher volume. This is an activity that has helped generate jobs for both men and women, to consolidate families, and to help us educate our children and let them grow healthy. There is a change in the family life. There is work, there is unity then, and there's no need for the man or the woman to go away from their home. For me, before we talk about logging, felling trees, I think about how can I improve the conditions of my people. I don't necessarily think these people should go to, the city or to risk their life going abroad, since we have the opportunity to use this rich resource that God has given us. With regards to women's participation, we are working so that women can participate more and more, and not fear taking decision-making posts. And I take advantage to say at this point that in my organization, I am the first woman president, because the forest sector has been dominated by men. Thank you. Thank you, and it's an honor. I think we've done a good job. Not that I want to brag, but I've been president for 3 periods, for 3 terms. So I think my colleagues are happy with the work that we have done. They have seen the changes. We've been able to talk about things, or what I have said. We are here to give for whatever I need to for the people of my country.
Thank you very much for this look at the FLEGT VPA process from the perspective of the communities and women. Now, to close this session, we had the participation of civil society and the government, and we now have a representative of the private sector, Juan Francisco Garcia, who is an economist and has been working in the forestry sector for 12 years. He's the president of the Association of Foresters of Honduras. Mr. Juan Francisco Santos Garcia, you're welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you to the EU, to Chatham House, to those of you present for giving us this platform. And this time, my presentation will be a little different to those done before mine, because I represent the private sector in this forestry equation, especially with regard to the implementation of private plantations with trade purposes. The association that I represent is the Association of Foresters of Honduras, ANACIL, and our goal is boosting the forest trade based on the principles of legality as a way to promote forest governance. And the best timber is legal timber. Where are we now and who are we? Honduras is located at the heart of the Americas. It's a zone rich in forests as a tropical region. It presents diverse forest ecosystems and areas with potential for forest plantations. A large area of land in the Sula Valley is the heart of a significant area of commercial forest plantations. This is the north area of the country by the Atlantic, the Caribbean. Here we have over 3,300 hectares in plantations that have been planted for commercial purposes, and the ages here are between 12 and 6 years. What is ANACIL? ANACIL is an association made up of private reforesters, agro-industrial enterprises, and groups of farmers and foresters interested in plantation forestry and timber harvesting and trade of forest species. ANACIL's headquarters are in the Honduran Agricultural Research Foundation, based in La Lima, in the Cortes Department. In 2014, the Association of Foresters of Honduras was created with the involvement of 126 professional associations and a plantation area of around 3,300 hectares. We have very strong links with the ICF, with El Zamorano, Unifor, Geoforest, and other institutions that work with this in these themes. FLEGT VPA and ANACIL. The Association of Foresters of Honduras has been a part of the VPA National Technical Committee since November 2015 and has been involved in the development of the legality assurance system through the legality matrices. As a stakeholder in the improvement of the forest governance and trade, ANACIL works towards market legality through the promotion of timber from commercial forest plantations. We have launched a campaign among our partners, and we are making an effort to advocate and promote this sentence: the best timber is legal timber. Where are we and how are we doing it? All the plantations are located in private lands as pure blocks or monocultures and or mixed with other crops. The big majority are in flat areas and valleys which yield good results and require few forestry practices. Most of the plantations have introduced fast-growing species, and from June 2019 we have been working with an approach aimed at linking academia, enterprises and industry. Here, I want to mention that recently we signed an agreement with the ICF, the Honduran Forest Administration, and the Forestry University in Honduras to strengthen and promote commercial plantations, private commercial plantations. This goes from genetic material that we will use via the academia. The university will provide us with scientific backing of the areas where we can plant which species, and also information with regard to the origin of this genetic material that we will use. ICF is the Forest Administration and the regulatory body that will define the rules that we have to abide by when it comes to implementing these plantations. And us, as private investors, we will define the amount, the investments that we're able to do, where and when. Honduras is the first country in Latin America to initiate a voluntary partnership agreement with the EU, which will improve the governance and therefore the timber market that we have been and will continue to be a part of. Overall assessment of experiences. Despite there having been several experiences in forest management with the support of international actors, there's still a need for incentives that will allow private actors to take part within forest management, particularly foresters and/or reforesters that have and harvest commercial forest plantations. This means that despite the intentions or the objectives of this agreement being the best, we, as private sector, we feel that there is a need of much more. In terms of regulation, that's all good, the governance is good, the laws are good, but we need promotion. We need incentives for private investors to come to Honduras and to contribute to the regeneration of land, empty or degraded land. For this, we need the support of the international community, the support from the government, to design and draft these laws that will encourage these large-scale commercial plantations, and this will take off some pressure from the natural forest in terms of timber demand. Imagine in 20 years' time, much of the timber coming from private plantations. These will reduce the pressure that we're putting on natural forests. Several studies have been carried out within the framework of the FLECT VPA initiative and have shown that the involvement of all actors translates into better governance. The lack of a competitive sectoral culture is obvious within our forest service. Ongoing initiatives. ANACIL is working towards the establishment of a law for the promotion of commercial forest plantations that will allow us to integrate both monetary incentives and fiscal benefits for all of those that invest in plantations, and it will also allow for an improvement in competitiveness. This agreement that is backed and supported by ANACIL is a favorable scenario for the context of national and international trade, mainly of forest products and subproducts, which will lead to a substantial contribution to the socio-economic development of the country. Relevant events prior to the VPA. One of these is the depletion of productive forests and the shortage of raw materials for the forestry sector and small enterprises. Expectations on the VPA, FLECT VPA process. The forest private sector hopes for the implementation of policies to improve competitiveness, and the private sector awaits or hopes for the reactivation of the national economy through the promotion of private forest plantations. By having a clear law, a clear framework for the promotion of these plantations, private plantations with aimed for trade, this will bring to Honduras more resources. It will increase job opportunities. We will improve the climate. We will contribute for a long time to stopping global warming, or some of it. It's like planting gold. If we create a plantation for trade, it's basically like planting oil, because this will help the communities, and also in the long term we will experience a substantial economic benefit for the country, for the communities, and for ourselves. There are clear signs that there's a need for change. You have 3 minutes left. To create partnerships with the private sectors will be key to come up with private governance initiatives such as voluntary certification systems and commitments to achieve deforestation-free supply chains, to integrate forests in the strategies of sustainable development strategies. Is necessary to have efficient associations and partnerships and the involvement of the private sector. We know it. The source is a document published by the FAO in 2018. How are we doing this? With clear long-term rules, strengthening research and technical support through academia and universities, promotion to the development of markets for products that come from plantations, consolidation of clusters, training of operators in the value chain, legality and controls, deregulation of access to market. Conclusions: to promote commercial forest plantations and to improve the market that can be easily achieved with a permanent governance, because without trade, there's no sustainability. Honduras could be ready within 4 or 5 years to start exporting timber from commercial plantations to special markets in the European Union. The Central American region has a large amount of land under commercial forest plantations, which can open this market in a wider and more sustainable way. ANACIL and UNIFOR are strengthening ourselves to face this challenge. Many thanks.
We would now like to invite our 3 panel members to come and join us. We have about 35 minutes in order to answer questions and concerns. Who would like to start this time for questions? There's one here, the second there. Is there a third one? Is there any other? Okay, let's start, please. I'm going to ask my question in Spanish, if that's okay. First of all, my question is addressed to Mr. Santos Garcia. What do you think about the study by the Nature magazine, which tells us that native forests are 40 times more effective when it comes to absorbing carbon than forests from plantations? If the government wants to generate forests through plantations, or to, for example, to face climate change, perhaps there should be a strategy addressed to wild forests. That's my first question. And the second question is for Mr. Mario Antonio Martínez Padilla, and it's with regards to whether it is considered as part of the national strategy, of the FLEDGE strategy. It's generating more security for climate activists in Honduras, since there have been 120 that have been murdered since 2010. Would Mr. Juan Francisco like to answer the first question? You're absolutely right. This report is true. Natural forests are definitely able to absorb more carbon, and they benefit or they allow the stopping of climate change, but we can't let nature act on its own. One way or another, we have to cooperate. And we think that plantations, with the establishment of plantations with commercial purposes, the earnings of the natural forest will be to remove the pressure from the demand for timber, both for the furniture industry use and also for biomass, for electric energy, and also for domestic use, for fireplaces. This is a solution to demand of natural forest products. That could be the established plantations could be the answer to that. Minister, I would like to add something to what has already been mentioned by Mr. Santos, because for your question, we have a great participation as government. We have a national restoration program that deals with both contexts, with the promotion of the restoration of national wild forest and also plantations. These allow or contribute to carbon fixation, but we know that natural forests are more dynamic, but in this both are included. I would also like to answer your second question, and I'd like to mention that, yes, within the framework of the VPA, with the entities that deal with safety for the country, the police force, the judiciary, etc., are included. The figure that you have mentioned was not very, let's say, limited to the VPA context. I assume that it's a figure coming from back in time. The important is that it has been considered. But I would also like to mention three important elements. First of all, it's essential for you to know that within the forest sector in Honduras, some illicit activities have developed, which also contribute to the effect that you have mentioned. I won't go into detail about this, but I assume that you have information about this. Also, the relationship between the different bodies. We are the regulators of forest policy, and obviously legal policy is ruled by other bodies. However, we cooperate fully when it's our competency. Also within the forest sector, there are some actors, more than beyond the three of us who are present here. They are also part of this, and they also contribute to those statistics, negative statistics that you have mentioned. There was also a second question there.
Hi, my name is Antoinette Salam. I have questions to the president of Cooperatives Honduras, Norma Rodriguez, and Mr. Garcia from the private sector. Okay, thank you for your excellent and very informative presentation. I'm sure that among us here as participants, there are some investors. What is your message to them? And is beekeeping an activity in the forest? Okay, the second question to Mr. Garcia. Are the products from the private plantations available to the surrounding communities?
You were asking about what message we'd like to give to investors. Please invest in our country. We are honest people. I think that we need those investments in order to improve the opportunities for people within the communities. And we also need you to open those doors. We need a lot of support and management in order to give capacity to our human resources, and also the opportunity for us to open the markets for our products, because currently we are taking cooperatives to diversify in their production. For example, one of the activities is honey production, which is a supplementary activity in order to improve both the condition of the environment and also for producers. We currently have very good experiences with some of the cooperative members which are producing very high quality honey, which could enter a European market, because we know you have a lot of honey, a lot more than we do, but we also have to increase the production. We have the necessary areas, we are willing to work, but we need the support of the investors. That would be my message. With regards to the question, thank you for making such an interesting question. With regards to whether the communities around us have access to our products, not only do they have access to our products, but the most part of our plantations are located in rural areas, in land that were degraded previously. They were used for livestock farming or for other types of crops. And also, the surrounding communities have access. Apart from the fact that they have access to us, we have also created in those areas the relevant conditions in order to provide work for the people who live in those communities, from the implementation of gardens and crops, and also for the transformation of the timber from those intermediary crops in furniture, chairs, and so on. Thank you. I would like to add another additional element with regards to the bees, not so much in the context of the product, but also for biodiversity. Bees are essentials for pollination. They are part of the wildlife cycles, and for us have a great importance. But also as a product, in the forest sector, indigenous communities above all, we have been implementing community life plans, which, although it gives priority to the forest sector, it also looks at other ways of living. And as an element of income diversification of those communities, beekeeping is one of those essential activities. Are there any other questions for our speakers? Okay, there's here 1, 2, and 3. Okay, please go ahead. I will also ask the question in Spanish. I'd like to thank you for your willingness to tell us your professional experience. It's clear that you have to tell us all the situation, that economic development is essential in order to stop illegality. I always say,
Fernando Navarro de Interpol.
I'm Fernando Navarro from Interpol. For criminal organizations, we can leave law enforcement agencies for that. However, for the development of a country, people need sustainable economic development in the future. And with regards to my position and my work, and to the Minister Mario Antonio, with regards to illegalities in those transnational cases within the region, have you been able to establish good lines of communication, or what is missing in order to develop better communication lines within the region, within the other countries in the region, in order to stop criminal activity that hurt our region? That's all. The second question was here.
Mr. Garcia, as a private sector person, what's your fear for the implementation of VPA in your country?
And the third one, it will be from the colleague from Peru.
Buenos días, colegas.
Good morning, colleagues, everyone. I have a question. Could you introduce yourself? Soy Rosa Vaca, and I represent the native representation of Peru, of Marea de Dios, Peru. The question is addressed, I'm not sure whether to the state representative or the representative of the cooperatives. It's with regards to the land tenure. The land tenure is very important in order to develop any kind of activity anywhere. The state of your country, how has it planned the land and the forest area in order to issue the harvest permits? Has it done any kind of planning? It has issued concessions, because there are also indigenous communities with ancestral rights. How does the state administer these forests in order to issue rights? Because this issue of land tenure assumes there are rights and so on. Okay, we have three questions, so let's deal with transnational illegality first. For my colleague from Interpol, I'd like to say, first of all, that our position as a government, it's with regards to cooperating with national and international protocols that we have signed, but also, as an institution, we are not those entrusted to carry out the investigation. We have the national security system. Around it, when it comes to environmental offenses, we have some we are the ones who sometimes carry out some investigations. Up to this date, in transnational situations, we have not had major participation, but our position is always one of cooperation where necessary. Mr. Juan Francisco, the implementation of VAP as a private sector. With regards to the question, with regards to my opinion about the VAP implementation, the VPA implementation is definitely an opportunity to change some things that we have been doing wrong and that we can now improve. I have been listening to laws and regulations and fines for over 40 years, even for illegal logging of forests. However, the results have not been significant. Despite all of these laws and regulations, forests are still being deforested. we're still losing pine forests, and broadleaf forests. And I think that the VPA is going to change this, because now the government will be more committed with this international agreement, and the private sector is going to be more interested in producing. And I would like to say again, in particular, the establishment of private plantations for commercial purposes. Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether Norma or the Minister would like to answer both the question with regards to the land tenure in order to issue in permits for forest harvesting. I'd like to start, and maybe the Minister can then complement the answer. The problem is that there have been several institutions in the country which establish a land title, and this is where confusion has taken place. Those who have greater clarity in their land tenure are the indigenous people, because they've received their private titles, which the ICF and the government has signed with them. But when it comes to communities, we don't have that security yet, because there were times when the Property Institute, the Institute of Property, issued titles to people, but ICF was not aware of that within forest areas. So ICF had determined them as forest areas, and they still thought they were national level and assigned them to communities. But when we went there, we realized that other bodies had issued titles to some people. And this is where the problem has been with losing of legal security when it comes to land tenure. Some things have been done. ICF has created a committee so that if a title is being issued, it has to go through ICF first. But I think the problem dates back a long time. So how do we solve that so that when communities are assigned an area, these areas are clear of these kind of problems? Many thanks. Minister?
I would like to clarify a couple of things here. In the first place, I'll talk about the three key actors that at national level we are working on the land tenure issues: the Institute of Property, the Agrarian National Institute, and the ICF. We are the three actors that are involved in all matters around land tenure. However, my second point here is to mention that as an institution, we led a regularization program within the forest sector, and this is a part of a program to assign or allocate land to communities. And the third point is that within this program, the priority are the indigenous peoples within the framework of not just their legal rights, but also ancestral and cultural rights. Up to date, we have around 54 plans and a similar amount of allocations, and these are in indigenous territories. The community is very much so a part of this regularization process. I would also like to recognize that the issue around land tenure is one of the key aspects that limit today our progress on the allocation of concessions, because this is a subject that dates back a long way back, and we have a program, a national regularization program trying to solve this, and we are including the indigenous communities as part of the achievements here. I would like to also ask a question here to Ms. Norma, and it's taking into account what you said, that the forest sector in Latin America and Honduras and in the Caribbean is a sector in which only men tend to take the decisions. So what has been the key difficulty that you have encountered as a woman to be involved in the decision-making process as part of the VPA FLEGT process? And also, if you overcame this difficulty, how did you go about doing it? So, in the country, we have this macho attitude, and it exists in men, but also in women. And it was a decision to be involved, to participate in those spaces that were just led by men. In these processes, when I started, there were only 2 women, 2 of us in the assemblies. And it was basically impossible for a woman to reach a high level like I have. And we had to prove our interest, our will. And we created this trust so that people knew that we could carry out our work within the organizations. And in an assembly of all men, to be elected as the president of the federation, where never before had been a woman in this role, to be elected it truly was a significant achievement. And to remain in this position for so long and in this space has been great. We have created alliances with other organizations that have supported us, international NGOs, the ICF, the National Council of Women in Cooperatives. We have been working hard to raise awareness, especially amongst men, of the right that we have to participation and the duty to see us as their equals, to give us the space, because we have a right to be involved, to be there, and we don't just have to prove that we can, because in these spaces men don't have anything to prove. The space is open for them, but for women we still have to prove our worth, we still have to prove that we're able to carry out these jobs. And yes, it has not been easy, but we have managed to open spaces for other women in the forestry sector, and now we have several cooperatives that are being led by women, and it fills me with pride to say that these are cooperatives that have been strengthened by the presence of women. So we have shown that women are better at management, that we're more honest, and I'm really sorry, but we have proven that we can do a good job, that we have good experiences where women who are in charge of these cooperatives, the cooperatives are growing. So it has not been easy, but we have done it, and we will carry on doing it. Thank you very much. I don't think there are any more questions, so we will close this session. We'll thank our 3 presenters and to all of you for your attention. And now I think we all need a coffee. Thank you.